Well, hey, everybody. It's been quite a while since you've heard my friendly voice here on a podcast. I decided recently that I would start a new podcast called The Force. As you get to know my guests, you'll understand why I call it The Force, because these women that I'm having on this podcast are truly a force to be dealt with and to be listened to and heard and respected. They have the courage to go out there and create change and break things that need to be broken and build things that need to be built. And I can't tell you how excited I am that our first guest on my first episode of this new podcast is our California State Treasurer, Fiona Ma. Fiona, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. I feel honored that I am your first guest. And
Yes,
so,
yes, you are. I have known of you. I met you years ago. I mean, long ago, before you were in your current position, and had a little girl crush, right? You worked really hard to get where you are. I really respected the tight-knit family that you have and the path that you took, and I know your story, and it's really great. So today, I'm going to ask you a few questions. We're going to let the rest of the world know your story because I just think you're the bee's knees, and they should know you.
oh.
So I want to start with what inspired you to run for office in the first place, and how do your experiences shape your priorities as a leader?
Yeah, so I never thought I was going to run for office. My parents were not born in this country, and they were born in a country where you don't run for office. And so growing up, they did not encourage us to get involved in our student council, for example. It was all about getting straight A's and, of course, playing the piano and other instruments, which I did. I really enjoyed playing the drums and percussion instruments and had a band at one point and played in the orchestra. But sports is really where I excelled. I played four sports in junior high and high school: tennis, basketball, volleyball, and softball. And I really,
Wow. Oh my
and I
gosh. How did you have time to make straight A's?
Well, I didn't have any AP classes.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing. What well-roundedness you have,
yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, I grew up in New York, in Long Island, in Great Neck, Long Island. And my parents at the time, they weren't really like, you need to get five AP classes. And I did have a really good friend, Elizabeth Kong, who she was one of those students, right? Her parents really pushed her to be in five AP classes, and she did. But my parents were like, if you get straight A's, great, you can go do what you want. And so sports is something that I really enjoyed. And I really like team sports. And I think that tells you a lot about a person, especially in politics. If you like individual sports, then probably staying at the local level is probably where you will be most comfortable. I am a team sports person, so I loved being in the legislature. Being in the assembly, you're in the assembly or you're in the Senate, you're the legislature versus the governor or California against Washington, D.C. or the world. And so I really like, that team concept. And now, as state treasurer, this is my fourth elected position. I am the CEO. The people are my boss. I oversee over $3 trillion coming into my accounts, and my short-term portfolio is about 200 billion, and I issue all the bonds for the state of California and fund and finance everything. It is a lot of responsibility. Being a CEO, right? I have 500 people that I am responsible for. If the lights go out, I have to make sure, my office is still running, even during COVID, for example. And so, yeah, I mean, every position is a little bit different, but I'm glad that, after 30 years, I am fairly comfortable being the state treasurer, especially given my background and experience. But there are a lot of sleepless nights.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, you still wear it well, but I want to ask you that because I know what a great job you have done. I want to know, what did the fires do to sort of, throw a wrench in the works?
Yeah, so this is probably my fourth period, either a downturn or some travesty. Back in 2001, we had our first downturn when I was on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Then, when I was in the legislature, we had the Great Recession. And then, as treasurer, we had COVID. And of course, through this entire time, we've had all these fires and floods and mudslides. And so it really is very daunting for not only the residents, but for us in government, trying to think about ways that number one, we can help people quickly. Number two, where can we come up with the additional funding if need be? And then number three, just preparing for the next time it happens. And we kind of feel like we're always preparing for fires, for example, right? And so during COVID, we had record surpluses. And so I know the governor really put a lot of money into the Office of Emergency Services and making sure that we do what we can to clean, the brush and create those protective spaces, but it still happens. So we still have wind, we still have fire and sparks, and things happen. And just seeing that in Los Angeles, in kind of the big dense urban environment, we don't necessarily see or expect fires to be like that. And so it was very devastating, not only in the Palisades but also in Altadena and Pasadena, where many families, many generations, they lost everything. They didn't have anywhere else to go. And so we are trying to figure out how best to help everyone and make sure that, everybody's working together, the federal government, the state government, local elected officials, because every time a document sits on someone's desk too long, or you're waiting for someone to get back to their desk, to get back to work, right? To sign off, slows everything down. So that's kind of where we're at on all of these travesties. I am involved, whether it has to do with money. People are looking for funding, like for hospitals. We went through a period where there are many hospitals that are having a hard time keeping their doors open. So we issued 17 distressed hospital loans. We also gave a lot of grant money to CDFIs. Those are community financial institutions, so that they can give money out to their communities and help with some operating cash flow needs sometimes. So everybody's having a hard time, and everybody calls me when they need money.
Yeah, you're like my daddy. No, I'm just kidding. I do want to say, folks, those of you who are not in California, you may not realize we could not have prepared for this. There's no scenario on planet Earth where we could have prepared for this many fires all at once. So, if you're hearing stories that we didn't do our job, those are false narratives, because this was a devastating act. We've never experienced gale force winds that carry embers across miles and miles and miles of property. So please give some grace on that, because this is not something anyone could have prepared for. But the fact that we are bouncing back and doing things that need to be done to recover is, I think, very noteworthy. So on that note, speaking of public safety and such, what's your approach to addressing issues of public safety while also, making certain that you're just and fair?
Well, I think, if you just take yourself, for example, right? As women, we want to feel safe when we are out in the streets, when we are going shopping, when we're in our car, whether we're going to work. Um, Safety is, I think, paramount, especially for women. And as we get older, right, we get more fragile, we get more vulnerable, and we become targets. So, public safety has always been something that I am always worried about. I used to, run, for example. I used to run late at night or early in the morning, and now I feel like I cannot do that anymore. And so, not feeling safe is something that I think a lot of people do share. And so public safety is very important. It's important to my constituents that I've been serving, and I think it's important to the people. And so that's why we recently passed Prop 36 here in California, is because of the concern of people, public safety, retail theft, car break-ins, home break-ins, right?
The
People are
smash and
just saying
grabs.
smash and grabs. And I've seen it and I've recorded it. And as I'm recording, the car is trying to run me over in the street so that, I can't get their license plate, or I can't get their faces. I mean, that is not the society that we all want to live in. So public safety is important. Police and fire have always been an ally. I married a firefighter. And so, I kind of understand how difficult it is to be a 911 first responder in this world where they are seeing the worst because firefighters are on the call, first ones on the call. And then I recently sat next to a 911 responder and I said, how do you take it every day? Because all you do is answer phone calls of people who are, screaming and upset and scared and, needing help. And she's like, it is not easy being a 911 responder. So anyone who's doing that frontline job is to be commended.
I want to give a huge shout out to those first responders, and everybody loves a firefighter. They deserve every good thing you hear of them and every penny they make and more, if you ask me. I would say the daily trauma that they and the 911 dispatch receiver, call receivers, I don't know how they do it. I hope we do enough for them, or can do more if possible, because that is incredible what they do. I did not know you were married to a firefighter. I love you even more now, right? So, my man's military, but yeah, I get it. I love that you support the first responders.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I'm very keen on inclusivity and representation. I know you know that. What do you do to ensure that underrepresented groups, including women and other minorities, have a voice in government? I know you oversee 500 folks, so how do you personally feel about that, and what do you do to act on
Yeah.
those feelings?
So going back to your first question, I never thought I would be in politics, but after I left the big eight accounting firm, I was working with Ernst and Whinney here in San Francisco. After 5 years, there were no women or people of color in leadership, and so I started my own practice and became president of the Asian Business Association. And that was the first time at the age of 28 that I had to go down to City Hall in San Francisco and come to Sacramento to testify and even participate with the Small Business Administration in DC that politics is important and that we need to be at the table. We need to have that voice, or people need to be that voice for us. And so for me, leveling the playing field, trying to help those people who are most in need of government. Their voices may not be heard because they're going through, whatever, life struggles that they go through. That's where I really step up and really try to represent, people who whether it's domestic violence or women who are convicted of life without parole, giving them a second chance to get their cases heard. There's about over 100 women that are out because of my last two laws. Hepatitis B, I'm the poster child for hepatitis B. It is a um, an affliction that happens. 1 out of 12 APIs, Asian Pacific Islanders, has hepatitis B directly linked to liver cancer. And so by advocating for more testing and, taking care of your own health, we've been able to save a lot of lives. My mother had depression growing up, and so that is also very complicated, not only for the person who has it, but for the family members, especially those that don't understand. Like my father was always trying to wean my mother off medications because he doesn't need medications, and some people need medications, right? So, all of that, I like to be in that space where it is difficult or people don't want to be in that space. And um, the harder and more difficult the issue is, especially if someone challenges me that I can't get something passed, that's where I really like to kind of step up and challenge the status quo.
Wow. I'm smiling ear to ear because that, folks, is why I call this podcast The Force. She is the force personified. And wow, at such a young age, let me ask you, overachieve much? That's amazing. That's amazing. You've done a lot of work, some of which I do know, some of which you just expressed that I did not know about. So awesome. And thank you for sharing that. I want to switch topics a little bit, talk a bit about economic and social issues. We talked about women Let's talk about affordable childcare, paid family leave, and other issues that maybe directly impact working families.
Yep. I think that's the difference between women and men who come into this job. Women don't run for office easily, whereas the men will self-select and not check in with the family when a woman is identified or asked to run. Our first response is, let me think about it. Let me talk to my family.
Let me ask my husband.
Let me ask my husband. Yes. Um, can I do a good job? What does the job require? Does my resume reflect the right requirements? Can I win? I mean, all of these things go through our head. But when women do step in, it's because of a cause. It's because of something that they are passionate about. Like if you ask every woman who's in the legislature, you ask them, why did you run? They know why they ran. And still to this day, they are still advocating for that issue, trying to make it better for others. And it's mostly these family issues, whether it's childcare, whether it's taking care of their seniors, right? Intergenerational care, whether it's equity, pay equity, making sure women are represented at all levels, like corporate boards. I mean, clearly, we don't have a lot of, we're not equal.
Absolutely not.
And so, is there a way for us to do it? And I think that's the difference, and why women work on the issues that we work on, because we live it every day.
Right.
And we see the struggles. Recently I've been talking to a lot of caregivers, right? I live with my father who's 90, and I lived with my parents before that. My mom passed away 7 years ago, but we could really see the differences as people age and they want to age in place. So they want to stay home, but it becomes more and more difficult to live at home, right? Sometimes the burner is left open. Sometimes the garage door is open. Sometimes, he doesn't bring, the recycling downstairs. So now we have a recycling box, upstairs, right? Things just change. And so, I think as women, we bring all of those life experiences to the table. And when we get in these positions, we want to make a change uh, based on our life experience. And so that's what I think is the difference between women and men in running for office and also while they're serving in office.
I would say in the years of my work with gender equity, um, men might say, I'm not interested in women's issues, but what they don't realize when they say that is women's issues are everyone's issues, right? We create the world.
Right.
So if you're not interested in women's issues, then you're not interested in women, men or children or elderly or any issues, right? Because women's issues are everyone's issues. So
Well,
I
and men
love
wouldn't be here without a mother.
there you go. Well, that's true. That's true. And then like you, I too was a caregiver while so I was raising my son and caring for my mother at the same time. And I don't think our operating system that was created by certain men, right, accounts for that,
Right.
right? They don't take it into account that we are definitely not just the sandwich generation, but the hot press panini, as my friend in Chicago calls herself, the
Well,
panini generation.
yeah, and if you're at home taking care of your parents, um, that's part of the in-home support service that we provide, but we don't get paid that much. If we're a
Right.
teacher, which is mostly a women's profession, we don't get paid very much. Like we're working on a bill right now that would allow women who are teachers to have paid family leave if they have a child and complications, right, that go around having a child. Because right now, many teachers plan to have a baby during the summer months so they don't have to take extra time off. And if there's complications, they have to pay out of their pocket, right? They have to take their own vacation and sick leave. And then if they can't go back to work and they have to have a substitute, they're paying for the substitute. Meanwhile, they're not making a lot of money. I know. Can you believe that?
I did not
So,
know that. I was going to interrupt with a big, oh my God, but I
yep.
did not know that. That's horrific. I know they
Yeah.
pay their own school supplies oftentimes when the kids, yeah, teachers are a special kind of angel, right? So
Yep.
I'm
So we're
glad
running
that you're
that bill
doing
again.
this. Yeah. So before we close out the show, which is in a bit, not right now, but I want to make sure to ask you what are the hot things you're working on right now so that I can track them and update people and let them know where we are on Team Fiona,
Okay.
and making certain that we pay attention to this path that you're paving. But I want to ask you also about things that everybody cares about, like infrastructure, right? So what are we doing to improve, local and state infrastructure, transportation, housing, broadband access? Now, I'm just going to give you a little insight into what's really important to me, and that is bridging the digital divide. So tell me more.
Yeah. So these are infrastructure is super important, but it is very, very expensive. And according to many studies, we are trillions of dollars, right, behind in infrastructure needs, whether it's new infrastructure or even just updating, repairs and maintenance type of infrastructure. So I issue all the bonds for the state of California, which goes to build the roads and the bridges and the tunnels. And even then, we issue twice a year. It's really not enough, but we try to focus on the most important crumbling infrastructure so that, we can make sure that we are saving lives. But there's so many needs. If we're going to build housing, housing is a priority. I am a real estate tax accountant, and so housing has been a focus. I chair two committees that allocates the bonds and the tax credits for affordable housing. So we are doing the best, but affordable housing does take a lot of financing. It's like a very complicated puzzle. What we're missing is workforce housing for the government workers, the teachers, the firefighters, right? The people that are just, starting to work. We don't do a lot. We don't subsidize any of that housing. Plus, we need more housing on our college campuses, our CSUs, our UCs, and our community colleges. We have 116 community colleges. Many of them were commuter schools in the past, but now, because of the high cost of student loan debt and some young people that don't know what they want to do, so they don't want to necessarily go to a four-year college right now. They are going to community college, but there's no place for them to live. And so they're living out of their cars or trying to rent an apartment, but that's very, very expensive, especially if you're 18 and trying to go to community college. And think about the foster youth who are just trying to get ahead and struggle. They're having a difficult time. So, I think education is definitely the equalizer. The governor has also he also wants to have free preschool or TK for all children. I think that's a great idea. But again, all of these programs require us to have money. So we need to have a surplus, and that means creating jobs. So job creation, economic development is something that I have been keenly focused on since I have the money. I know where the money is. I know how to get the money out. I know what some of these programs are, and sort of be that bridge. But I'll give you an example, the high-speed rail. That's the Bright Line train that is going to go from Rancho Cucamonga to Las Vegas in 2.5 hours. It's going to be all electric. They just sold bonds last Thursday. They did very well in the market, and they should be done by 2028. And so that means there's going to be hundreds of thousands of construction jobs happening in the high desert, but where are they going to live? And we can't build homes without more infrastructure, without more water, waste treatment, all of the wires and the cabling and the Wi-Fi that is necessary to be installed. And so that is definitely an issue, is this digital divide, because a lot of the rural communities don't have the infrastructure. And it's not going to be a priority with the state because their population is not as big as some of the other bigger cities that are also, fighting for different things. So I think there are solutions in the future. If you're a tech person, there are micro satellites, for example, right? We met with a satellite company in San Francisco, and they're going to put satellites over the Philippines because they have so many islands. There's no way for them to go under the ocean or builds from island to island, right? And so these mini satellites are going to be able to give them that Wi-Fi service. And so we just have to evolve with technology and the people that are out there to, you know, hopefully institute best practices, but then follow the money. A lot of times, the money does not follow new things, new inventions, new technology because they're not tested and
Right.
because the status quo gets the money. And once you give someone the money, it's hard to, reallocate it unless we have more money. So that's why we need to bring quality jobs. We need to bring more investments here to California. I'm glad that the governor is doubling our film tax credits because we lost a lot of filming 2 years ago, and they just didn't come back. And so hopefully that'll incentivize more of the industry to come back because there's so many small businesses that depend on Hollywood and filming, for example, that they are still struggling. And then you look at all the small businesses, the restaurants, the nonprofits, um, the companies that depend on people going places, right? After COVID, people are used to staying at home. They don't want to go to restaurants. They don't want to go shopping. They don't want to get in their car. They just order online. Well, those brick and mortar businesses are really struggling. So how do we, keep them in business as well, right? I always say shop local, support your small business owner, right? That is really important. And it's not always easy because sometimes parking is an issue. You go to some of these big boxes, they have a lot of free parking, and you go to some of these other communities and you have to put money in the meter, or there's not a lot of parking. So, I think there's a lot of things that we could do to improve the lives of people, but that may mean kind of getting back to the basics because sometimes we put so many barriers and, price tags, and it's just more and more difficult for people to kind of stay and make a living here in California.
I do want to address that issue about best practices. You did a great job painting a picture of systems thinking and how all these things are connected and dependent upon one another. And there are first and second and third order consequences from every decision we make and every plan we implement. Um, I don't think the average person thinks that way, and I want them to, right? So you sit in the heart of, really great innovation and creativity. So your realm of possibility in your mind is probably bigger than that in other people's minds, especially outside of Silicon Valley or outside of California or off the coast. Or, I have lots of people who are going to listen to this across the country. And you're talking about things that they didn't know were possible, and I love to be able to say that. Perhaps that's the ego of love and living in California. But what I love more is to see it in action and to show how housing, I have a lot of people say, not in my backyard, or NIMBY, I don't want that here. But then if you sit with them and you're able, and they're open to receiving your information, right? They have to be teachable. And you connect the dots to how more housing leads to better and faster economic development and growth, because companies will bring their employees here. Their employees will have a place they can afford to live because that company is paying them enough to buy that house in that city. So you did a really beautiful, in a matter of minutes, you did a really great job of connecting the dots, if you will, and showing the daily conundrum of where do we invest? What do we pull money away from that's no longer relevant or workable, that was perhaps, but is no more? How do you take money away from someone and give it to someone else? You have a tough time doing that. You have to make more money. So I love that you did that.
And I've
You
got another example.
give me.
So, I started the San Francisco Farm Bureau about 2 years ago, and that's because I never came from a farming community background family, right? Grew up in Long Island, Great Neck, and then moved to San Francisco back in 1988, and we didn't really grow anything here in San Francisco. Then I represented the Cow Palace when I was in the legislature, and back during the Great Recession, the governor wanted to sell the Cow Palace to balance the budget by selling certain state-owned assets. And so I had to get in the middle of that fight. We managed to save the Cow Palace, but I learned that the Cow Palace is the number one district ag association, and we have never had Farm Bureau in San Francisco. So after COVID, where we were fighting for vaccines and PPE from other nations, I said, I want to double down and make sure that we protect our farmers and ranchers so we continue to grow food, highest quality, safest food here in California. And so, on that sense, that's amazing because everybody trusts California. We just had an event, a learning event with the floral industry. And in California, 20 years ago, 80% of the flowers were grown in California. But
Wow, I did
be-
not know that.
I know, but because of all of the regulations and our water issues and um, the cost of labor,
Man. Yeah,
etc. Now 80% of the flowers that we buy in California are from another country. Now,
that makes me sad.
it makes you sad and it's much cheaper. But what we've done, so we're, our farmers are not growing here, right? Our floral nurseries are not growing here, but they're growing in other places that don't have the high level of, standards and regulations. And so those people in those countries are actually probably suffering, right? Because they're using toxic chemicals and pesticides, right? But then what they do, because everyone wants their flowers to last longer, they actually spray them, right? Because in order to ship them into the country, they cannot have a bug. If they have one bug, they throw out the whole container. So they have to put tons and tons of chemicals on there so there's no bugs, number one. But to make it last longer, they also put a lot of chemicals. So someone said one time, you need to stop and smell the roses. And you never think about what that means. But if
Right,
you smell an amazing rose, like it's so like it's so,
right.
like that's how a rose should smell.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
were grown in California. If you smell a rose that's not grown in California, you can barely smell that rose
I
scent.
understand.
And
Yeah.
so I now go around and smell all these flowers whenever I see it at my friends' homes, where it is. And if it doesn't smell that good, then they're being imported here
Yeah,
to this
I get it.
to California. So whereas on one hand, it's great we live here because we have all these environmental laws, but we also have shifted a lot of the industries away from California to other places where it's cheaper. And that's not really helping the global community, you know, as a whole, if they're not instituting those same high standards and regulations, now their people are going to be struggling. They're going to be in the ER. They're going to be dying early with all of these different health, ailments. Why? Because we like to have flowers here.
Again, a great example of systems thinking and the management of a complex system, which is your every waking moment. That's what you do. I can't recall the name of the company, but it was started by a young woman in San Francisco or in the Bay Area, and I used to order from her all the time. They're like fresh cut, grown here. I mean, they come in a burlap wrap, just so beautiful. I wish I could remember the
Could
name.
be Matilda's Bloom Box, Emily
Perhaps.
Bochetto. Yep.
Perhaps. And you
So,
can just click to order. It's fresh grown here,
yep,
cut here.
yep.
That's wonderful. And I love to see more of women-owned businesses blossoming, if you will, if you want to go with this flower theme here.
Love
Uh,
it.
so I love that. I did not know this story. Now you've got me. I order fresh flowers way too often, ask my husband. But I'm gonna have to now start sniffing everybody's flowers. Like,
Right.
where'd you get those flowers? No,
I
I don't
know.
think so,
I know.
right?
They're not
That's
grown in California.
exactly, exactly. Don't bring those in my house. Yeah. Well, let's move on to a little of your personal and ethical governance and style. How do you manage balancing your personal life and public service? Because I know you are crazy busy, keeping all the plates spinning and juggling all the balls. Do you have any boundaries at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was younger, you tried to have that balance or the perceived balance. And now that I'm 58, I'll be 59 next week. I don't really need balance. I mean, my life is public service and I am a super extrovert. I love people And so why wouldn't I do more of this instead of saying, oh,
Love
I
that.
should take time off because I should take, like, I like people. So I pack my schedule and I want to do more. I want to see more. I want to learn more. I want to, meet more people. And so that makes me happy. And I don't have to deal with the guilt of saying, oh, I should spend more time. And I feel bad because, my family, my dad's always says, oh, I don't see her that often, even though we live together. Um, but
I
I'm
would, I would,
happy.
I would say, so folks, this is audio only for you, but I can see Fiona and she's supremely happy telling this story. And what I would remind people is that self-care is as one defines it for self. And for her, packing her schedule, it sounds to me like you don't have work-life balance, you have work-life integration, and that's what brings you joy.
Exactly. So I like to go sing karaoke, for example. And I used to take time off and go with my friends. And now I will just create a karaoke party so
How
that, so that
fun! Oh my
you
God.
know, come meet Fiona and sing karaoke, right? So I combine both things so that I'm still working, perceived working, but also doing things that I enjoy. And I think for busy people like us that like people, and I know that you're nodding your head, let's find activities where we can enjoy. Like I did a movie screening the other day in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, because I'm helping some friends get their movie out, and it's important. It's about um, child actors back in the 60s and 70s, how they weren't really treated very well. And then as an adult, how this woman was a child actor, and now as an adult, how it's affected her whole psyche, but also the way she's still treated in Hollywood, even to this day. It's called Everyone Asked About You. And so we premiered at the Golden State Film Festival last week, and it was the best film of the festival.
Wow.
And so
That's
I'm gonna bring it to San Francisco. And I've gotten the San Francisco Domestic Violence Consortium. Beverly Upton, who's my very, very good friend, has about 40 different DV organizations to also partner with me on doing the screening. So we'll be giving out 200 free tickets to anyone who wants to come and see this movie. So it's, again, like, I love movies and I advocate, on behalf of certain issues. And I'm also a SAG member, so I still kind of like to keep my foot, in Hollywood. And so this brings everything together in one event. And, that's kind of how I'm living my life these days. Integration, like you said.
so it sounds to me like it's not busy, it's fulfilled, right? Your life's not busy, it's fulfilling. Well, this movie sounds amazing. I think I had heard a bit about it before. We'll talk later, but I had been hopeful to start a film commission in my own SoCal city. So maybe we can talk later
Yeah.
how I can help or whatever. But I'm very excited and I love to see you get passionate, roll up your sleeves, and really help the people that you know. Uh, a lot of people move on up and move on out and forget their friends, and you've never done that. So, well, what values guide you in making the tough decisions, maybe where there's not a clear consensus and you have to be that tough decision maker?
Yeah. So I always want to hear from both sides, or three sides, or four sides. And, I'm one that believes in trust but verify, because the person that's going to come and lobby you or give you that good idea, well, there's other people on the other side that may not think it's a good idea. And so it's best to go into a situation, especially if it's controversial, if you've heard all the sides. And then usually that leads me down this rabbit hole where I start, becoming so involved, whether it's garbage and recycling. I really cared about keeping resources out of the landfill because the landfills are filling up. So now I've done so many tours and, really trying to come up with those solutions so that we can, you know, preserve our landfills and try to, you know, waste less. But that's kind of what happens with me, is that I just, kind of get obsessed with an issue, and I lost my train of thought. What was the
Well, I
question?
was just going to say that, well, you're telling me about the values that guide you, and to me,
Yes.
it sounds like fairness, right? Equity and giving people an opportunity to make their case, starting with facts, making your own decision, and then giving merit to another stand. What you called your rabbit hole madness, I call your genius, right? So I think it's people who aren't willing to go that extra mile that really should start to think about going the extra mile because we fall prey to confirmation bias so easily. All of us, myself included, and I'm a researcher. I care, oh my gosh, so much about facts, right? And I want to make certain that we're all starting with fact-based information. Otherwise, I'm giving medicine to a dead man and there's no reasoning taking place, right?
Yeah.
That's a fool's errand.
But
You,
being able to solve problems, right?
yes.
A lot of my bills were like first in the nation bills, and they came from just normal people. I'll give you one of my first bills that I authored when I got to the legislature was called the name change bill. And it came about because a heterosexual couple that was getting married, the man wanted to change his name to his wife's name when they got married, but he couldn't do that easily. He had to, back then, take out ads in a newspaper. He had to go to court and usually hire an attorney to be able to change his name. Whereas when a woman
Mhm.
goes to city hall, she's able to put whatever name she wants. And so that this name change bill allowed a couple to use one or the other or a root or, a hyphen. Like you're Freeman, you couldn't be Ma, for example, right? But you could be Freeman Ma or combine the name. And then I found out that same-sex couples were having the same dilemma, that when they were together and they had a child, that the child had to have one last name.
Wow, I didn't
If-
know that.
I know, see? I mean, these are the things that like,
You're
you
amazing.
yeah,
This,
and so and
I
so
think you just proposed to me. Freeman Ma, I like it.
So yeah, so now,
That's great.
same-sex couples can, have a name that reflects the whole family so that when they go pick up their kid at school or in the hospital, people are not saying,
Right.
well, you have a different last name. Who are you? We don't have the proper documentation or the paperwork, and therefore you don't have those same rights. So, just things like that. Like I like to solve problems.
I had no idea. And what creative solutions you provide, right? So, just a little offside story. When my husband and I got married, our very first wedding gift came to the house, and it was to Mr. and Mrs. Mike Freeman. He was like, "What? What happened? Did we mess up the certificate? What happened?" So, yeah, he would love to be that today, I'll tell you that. But
Mm.
that's great. The first in the nation to do that, called the name change bill. I'm going to research it and share more about it, but that's just one of many creative solutions. I know you personally too have been a problem preventer as well. So that's key too in the work that you do. Well, we're almost coming to a close. I have a couple more questions. How would you, and I know you just mentioned that you care deeply about all sides of an issue, because people project, we perceive things differently. A same thing might look different to someone else. But how would you build coalitions and work across the aisle to achieve meaningful outcomes beyond listening, right? So at some point you have to take action. What sort of puts you over the edge?
I'm probably known to work across the aisle and to try to figure out how to focus on problems versus politics. Because I don't think politics um, goes very far in the long run. It just alienates people. And so being able to just call one of my colleagues and say, hey, I don't understand this, but I understand that, you're on this board or you have experience or this is your industry and your company. I'd love to just get your advice and hear, what your side is. And it's just even that little bit of reaching out and curiosity, not only listening, but also being able to take what other people have experienced and learn and maybe compromise,
I
right?
love that.
Because
It's not a dirty word, folks. And she's saying this proudly. Like she is definitely with resolve saying compromise is an answer. I
absolutely.
love that because even though politics inherently is not a bad thing, it's become bad, right? So politics is akin to divisiveness, whereas public service, which is more I see you aligned with, you put public service back in politics, right? So, younger generations of people, like some of my friends' children, they don't understand that Dems and Republicans used to co-sponsor bills on behalf of the people that put them in office. It was a totally different landscape and atmosphere and political arena back then. And it should be that way. So to hear you start this answer to this question with you care more about problem solving, which to me is public service. You work for all of us, right? It seems to me you remember that you also work for the people who voted against you, and that's important, right? So preventing problem, solving problems, being enthusiastic about doing it, finding joy in work-life integration. These are things that seem to describe you to me. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I didn't ask? And then I have one last question before we say our goodbyes.
Well, I would say to your listeners, because a lot of them are frustrated or angry or sad or um y- hopeless,
Confused,
confused,
hopeless.
that
Yeah.
that they need to get involved in politics. Like public servants, we are in that position where we can do something, but we need to hear from people. And most of us are just generalists, right? I'm a real estate tax accountant, so I probably don't need that much advice on real estate tax accounting issues, but everything else, I need to be able to call someone. So I always say you should be that person on their speed dial that when something comes up and it's something that you know that you're an expert in, that they should be able to call you and say, "Hey, Susan, what do you think about this bill? Can you review it? Can you let me know whether you would support it? Are there any, pitfalls down the road, unintended consequences, right?" So that's what I would say to people. And for women, once women get appointed to a board or a commission, and usually all levels of government, federal, state, local, they all are looking for commissioners. Then, yes, once you sit on there and you start becoming an expert, you become an expert not only maybe on the issue, but also on Robert's Rules of Order, on sunshine, on whatever, dealing with the public, public comment, angry. How do you deal with the press? How do you protect yourself from, your colleagues? Then the next step, you look at the elected officials and you say, I think I could do a better job. And that's usually women come from the commission serving like as a PTA president, and then they ran for school board. And then they're like, I could do more than this. Then they run for city council and then the legislature and then Congress, right? So that's what I would say to the women is get more involved. Don't be scared of politics, even though it's mostly a man's world. But when women get involved, we get elected and we can make an impact.
I can't even thank you enough for saying what you just said. It totally, I don't even have to ask the last question, which would have been, how would things be different if more leaders were women? And you just in a nutshell nailed it. I am doing this podcast to encourage more women to get involved. I want to amplify the voices of women who have been appointed and elected. If public service is something you're curious about but don't understand, I'm sure Fiona would be happy to share more. I know I would be happy to share more or to connect you with women who can tell you more. That was the perfect, wow, you just nailed it. That was the perfect taking it home, home run right there. It has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed knowing you, following your career. You are definitely, I mean, I don't know what your sign is, but you've got some gumption. You're definitely a go-getter. And well, if your birthday's next week, what does that make
I'm a
you?
Pisces,
There you go. There you
but
go.
yep,
Turning fantasies into realities, right? So
yeah. And then
imagine
in the Chinese community, I'm born in the year of the horse. So I am one
which
of
element
those that yes, yes. So, as a horse, we work hard. We're gonna die working
at work.
at work, working.
So
We
Fiona,
don't
what
sleep a
element are
lot.
you?
We don't
I'm a
rest a lot.
fire horse.
Huh?
I'm a fire horse.
I think I'm the fire horse
I
also.
think you are. Year 1966. So
Six,
yes, you
yes.
are.
Yeah.
That's that's the thing that probably draws me to
No
you.
wonder we get along.
There you go. Well, you are fantastic. First, second, third, last, all the guests. You've been, I mean, I've interviewed over the years with my other podcast more than 500 women.
Wow.
And this has been just really you answered all the questions, you shared a little bit of your personal philosophies and your background and upbringing and maybe your motivations, your intrinsic motives for doing what you do, which I love. It brings you joy, you change the world. I couldn't have had a better first guest.
Thank you. Thank you,
You bet.
Susan.
You
Always
bet.
good seeing you and look
You
forward to seeing
too.
you in person.
You will soon. You will soon. Well,
Okay.
have a great day, everybody. And thank you for tuning in. This has been The Force.